Again, welcome to EdCamp Day 2. My understanding is that most of the sessions run 30 minutes or so. This one will run about 50 minutes or thereabouts. So if you need to hop in and out for whatever reason, tending to things at your building, tending to things at your home, tending to things in personal life, we're all grown-ups, I get it. And we stuck copies of the slide deck in the chat so that you can follow along and you can come in and out, catch up, foreshadow a little bit if you like. That's all good. The best part of these types of conversations are really not the content of the slides. It's more the content and the conversations that we tend to have. So if you feel like you want to say some things in the whole group, that's all right. We'll likely break up into some breakout rooms a couple times throughout the course of our conversation so that you'll have some time to talk with each other as well. Those are likely you'll probably get more out of those conversations with each other than you will from hearing me talk at you for 50 minutes. So make sure we try to move some of that in there. This session, as you read, is around some of the steps that you would take in becoming an anti-racist school leader or moving along in that journey. And when I say leader, it's not something that is a formal title. Anybody who has influence over what goes on in the building is a leader. So this is what you don't have to be a principal, assistant principal, ASA, et cetera, in order to do that. So it's the same thing I hope you're sharing with your staff, and it's definitely what we share here at Wheaton Woods. We can all do that. And when I talk to my folks, oftentimes folks, my staff and some of the other folks I'm around, they say, hey, Dame, I don't know if I have the expertise to have these conversations comfortably, let alone lead these conversations. So this is why I put this sort of first step is educating yourself and committing to becoming an anti-racist school leader. This is why it's here. And what we're going to talk about is really, really briefly about why anti-racist school leadership is needed. You probably all have your own sense about that, which is why you're here. And then we'll talk about some ways you can educate yourself about it. And then you'll be able to share some stuff around with each other about how you're educating yourself and maybe sharing some ideas that'll help other people educate themselves too. A little bit about me. A couple of you may know me, some of you might not. So I'll share really briefly. I've been a teacher of some sort or administrator for 26 years. This is year 15 in MCPS. I was in Baltimore County for 11 years before that. I did a little bit in Baltimore City, a little bit of DC, very, very little in those areas. And now I've been here with MCPS as my home for a minute. Last 3 years, I've been the principal of Wheaton Woods Elementary School, which is in Rockville, the Wheaton area, Aspen Hill area. And I'm also a co-leader and co-founder of the Bond Project, which is a nonprofit that supports men of color in educational spaces. We've been around since 2013, 14, thereabouts. We do a lot of stuff locally, but we also have some national influence. I published some research in a peer-reviewed journal a few years ago around how to support men of color in education. And I am an aspiring author. I've signed a contract to write a book on anti-racist school leadership with a publisher that hopefully will be out in like a year. That's the hope. So we'll see about that. But some of this content we're discussing today will be related to that. And again, in the chat, for those of you who just joined, I stuck the slide deck in there today, or the slide deck in there so you can follow along. So we're going to get started really quickly with a 6-word story. This is what I thought about when I was thinking an anti-racist school vision that could really be distilled into a sentence or two or a phrase or two. And this is what I shared with some other folks, with my staff. Early on, I didn't share this because this hadn't come to me when I first shared my vision with my staff a couple of years ago. But this is where we are now. So if you take a look at it, it says change lenses, humanity is one cast. And it that came to me after reading Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, around how, and combining that with another book I'll share in a few minutes, to say there's so much that we think about in groups and out groups, and who's in our group, the groups to whom we belong and the ones that we hold most dear. And if we view everybody like they're in our in group, that's when anti-racism is truly alive. And that's the way I wanted my staff to see our school community, that it is their in group. So what I'd like you to do, since I got a chance to share with you why, or mine and what I wrote, I'd like you to share yours. Just stick it in the chat. Your 6-word story relative to anti-racism, your vision of anti-racism in your building or your department or your organization. Maybe it's a reaction to what I just said, or my 6-word story. You pick, but give me something in the chat. Your story, your reflection on your response to my story or someone else's. Oh, I like it, Sarah. Edward, I like that, man. That's deep. That's deep. That makes me think about like when I talk to my staff about working with their students, our students, when they see their students, do they look for themselves too? Like, how can looking at your class photo be just like looking at a selfie? Amen, Daniel. Teresa, yep. There we go. I like them all. I like them all. I appreciate it. So I've done this activity with a couple of different groups over the last, I don't know, year or two. And sometimes the chat is really quiet. I've been in the room with 50 people and only had a few in the chat. And I think this next slide that we show is connected to that. And this next slide is a creation of Andrew Ibrahim. He made this zone model of anti-racism. And there's a link in the slide deck. You'll be able to see that. And what he asked was, or what he did was create some simple criteria that would tell folks sort of where they are in the anti-racist continuum and how close they are to making change. So I thought about this, and this isn't something that it can be linear in terms of the growth, but it also could be something that doesn't have to be, because you may be in one zone versus the other, depending on the circumstances, depending on your context. Like when you are with your friends having a conversation, or in a different space, or at your, maybe a religious service or at a party or something, you may be in a different zone relative to the context. It also might be something at work versus in your personal life. So some of this has to do with psychological safety that you feel. So what I'd like you to do is taking a look at this. I'm not going to read you the the criteria because you can see them yourself, and I don't like reading the grown-ups. But you'll be able to think, where are you in this space? When you were thinking about being an anti-racist school leader, where are you, in which zone? And I also want you to think about where your school is in this zone, where your department is, in which zone. So do this. Like, so for example, if I was writing this about my school, I think I would say that I am in the growth zone, and my staff or my school building is probably in the learning zone. So I put growth/learning because I think I do not everything in the growth zone. I don't adhere to every sort of bullet, every criterion, but I am mostly there most of the time. And my staff, I think, is the same way. So there may be sometimes some of them are in the growth zone, but in the general sense, I think that's where we are. So I've given you a chance to sort of think through that and hear some rationale about why you may be in one place versus another. And what I'd like you to do now is in the chat, I'd like you to stick in your space. So where you are, then a slash, where your building is, where your department is, where your team is. And if you're only comfortable with yourself, I understand that too. You can just put one. You know, we're all developing that psychological safety.
Good question. So we're just looking at this from the lens of just where we are professionally, because I see it as totally different from just a personal, my personal position.
Nah, man, I think you put in there, you can put in there professional on the top line and then the personal on the lower line. You can add 3 slashes. This is open. So in a second, we're going to in a minute or two, we're going to have a conversation about it. And then I want you to throw that in there, Bakari. Let's have more of a conversation. Yep, I see mostly learning. Yep, some growth in there. That's pretty good. I tell you, man, like I want to say 2 months ago, I guess now, back in March, end of March, I talked to a group in Florida, and folks were in straight up fear down there, like in terms of their organizations. Like they were worried about losing their jobs for even having these types of conversations. It's a scary proposition, and it's also one that provides us some comfort being here in MCPS, where we can have these kind of conversations in the broad daylight, with our names attached. So I'm going to ask you now to have a conversation, and we're going to jump into breakout rooms, and I want you to share with the folks in your room why you chose the zone you chose for yourself and why you chose the zone you chose for your department. And then we'll come back in the whole group in about 10 minutes and discuss this stuff. So it's only going to be 3, maybe 4 of you in each room. So make sure we are equitable with our time so that everybody gets a chance to talk. The person whose birthday is closest to today, either forward or backward, you'll be the person that talks. You'll start us off. So we will have 10 minutes. And we are sharing. Make sure I'm giving you all of 10 minutes. We are sharing why we made the choice we made with our growth zones piece, with our zones. Hey, Alexandra, are you able to join 6? There we go. Laura, are you there?
Did we leave too soon, Damon?
It was a countdown for like 50 seconds or so. So yeah, you good.
Sorry.
It's all good. Now we're back in the main session. So now whatever you say is being recorded. So in the breakout,
Thank you.
say some stuff that isn't. So let's use our language.
Be mindful. I like that.
Hey, we're all hopping back now into the main group. So did anybody hear or say anything that you think that the rest of the group might want to hear? Bakari, I know before we hopped out, you were thinking about the personal versus professional language that you were using.
Yeah, it just varies. I mean, it's a challenge to just see where you are, you know, in your personal journey. You know, sometimes it just depends on the nature of how things play out. Sometimes I'm just in that fear zone. Definitely in that fear zone the previous 4 years with the administration I was in. You know, that was very challenging. And obviously it was challenging professionally as well. And, you know, having to learn a lot and grow, I felt like I was just in 3 phases, you know, my personal and professional space. That's just an example, just off the top of my head that I can think of.
Makes sense. And I heard Christina talking about her like thinking about a family and how, you know, we have to, or someone else was talking about thinking about when we're with a group of friends. So or we're with some other folks. And the family piece resonated with me because it's a part of what I shared with my staff. When we started having more intense conversations about this, it was some of the staff members were upset because not everybody was an early adopter of the anti-racist mindset or orientation. And some folks were upset and said, well, we wouldn't write off anybody in our family because they're not where we want them to be right yet. So we wouldn't write up the folks in our building are our family, you know, staff, students, community. So we're not writing off anybody. We're going to continue to dialogue with all of us and try to walk together because none of us are perfect in this work. So that family piece really resonated with me. So we may have some other folks hopping in because of because the 8 to 10:30 piece was there, and that's all right. They'll just hop on along. So we'll talk a little bit now about why we need anti-racist school leadership, and you are here, so we're going to breeze sort of through this piece. I heard some of the discussions we were already having in the breakout room, so I know you are here with me in terms of the knowing that we need this. So what I shared with my staff was that there's what I call the demographic hierarchy that has remained unchanged. Right. I said I work in a school that is primarily students of color, primarily students in poverty, but mostly students who either are or have been English learners at some point in their educational careers. So I said to my staff, for the last few decades, if not longer, our students and their families have been at the bottom of all the good lists and the top of all the bad lists. Right. We've changed curricula. We've changed school buildings. We're in a brand new building. We've changed superintendents and principals, and we've changed keywords and social emotional learning and grit and all kinds of stuff. And that still remains. So that tells me that there's something that's either wrong with our students and our families that creates this demographic hierarchy, or there's something wrong with the system that leads to this outcome. And for us, where we are is we're choosing that it's the system. And that means we need to dig deeper into it, interrogate ourselves, and figure out what changes we can make to interrupt this system and reconstruct it. And I'm of the belief that a lot of this system is structured in a way that is reinforcing a white supremacist narrative. And that is a part of the piece we really need to look at. And whiteness and white supremacy does not mean white people, right? So we're not saying that white people are wrong. Right? We're saying that a white supremacist mindset is, which all of us can have, is the issue, at least is a primary issue. And it's because it has an effect on how we interact with each other, our students and their families, of course, and it has an influence on all the outcomes in our school system, in our political system, in our housing, employment, healthcare, you name it, that's the issue. And that's why we need this stuff. Now the problem, well, one of the problems is it's a lot to fix, right? It's a lot to think about. When I submitted my proposal for the book chapter, we were saying there are 12 different things at least that we'd have to be considering. So where do we start? What's important? And if it's all important, then how do we get there? And so what I shared with my staff was a concept diagram, not this, but one that had stair steps that said, here's where we're going in 3 years. And here back mapped are the steps we need that are prerequisites to get us to where we need to be. And so I picked something that was in here, right? So for us, we are starting at this educating yourself and commit. For our conversation this morning with my staff, we were doing some book studies and article readings and community conversations and stuff. But it was the anti-racist vision that I cast to my folks that said, okay, we're kickstarting something different here. And let's go. Help me shape this vision or go find somewhere else. And so if you were thinking about this, because you got to pick something, somewhere to start, somewhere to move next, stick in the chat. Where would you go? What's the thing that you would use as the centerpiece as for your beginning? Not considering the educate yourself and commit piece. We're already there. But it may be that I guess it may be that you want your staff to get there too. See Dr. Carlton with the PD. Yeah. Yeah, intersectionality. Because folks are saying, well, it's not always about race. What about poverty? What about our students who are immigrants or have English immigration status issues? Yeah. Yeah, consistent PD. So that's a theme in what I'm seeing often. And I hear you, Stephen, the educating yourself and commit, stick in there for a second. And here's one of the things that I said to my staff. I said, because folks were saying, hey, give us any racist instructional strategies. Like, tell us what to do. Tell us how to be. Like, that's what we need. Just tell us what we should be doing in our classrooms. And I Googled any racist instructional strategies and did a screenshot and shared it during one of our staff meetings and said there are 648,000 hits for any racist instructional strategies. You don't need me to help you find them. Right? Our work and where we're going with this PD in our conversations is around why you haven't done that already. Right? And how you can help all of us get there. That's our work. So that's why what Stephen put in there, hey, stick with educating yourself and committing for a minute, because that may be where staff might be. And I get that. So when I think about educating yourself and commit, what I mean is really these 5 elements, right? The stuff on the left is a lot about being the consumer of the information. Right? So reading everything you can get your hand on, listening to podcasts, etc., viewing any videos that you can, coming to presentations like this one, all makes sense. Stuff on the right side is about being a producer, right? Sharing what you're learning about this work with other folks, because none of us know it all. So this whole experience about anti-racism is not about a destination, it's about an orientation. Right? So you are helping yourself, but also your staff, your team, your family even, to turn in a certain direction and just walk that way. That means you won't backstep or move to the side, or other things might not pop on your plate, but we're still moving in that direction. And that's what we're talking about. And for the sake of time, I'm going to share a couple of the pieces that I read over the last 10 years or so that stood out. And the reason why, and a link or two later, there'll be a piece on some articles that you could read. But the reason why I'm highlighting books is because books are different for me, because it's a significant commitment of my time and my energy to read a book, because it'll take me a week, a month, maybe longer to read a book and sit with the contents and wrestle with the arguments that the author is making. Like it signifies to me a different level of commitment. And so I really get sort of embedded in the ecosystem that the author is trying to create, and it changes my mind. And each of these books that are here really hit home on probably a bunch of different things, but a couple that really stuck out, and it sort of pushed me along my journey, right? That Courageous Conversations About Race. Before I read that, I really wasn't thinking about these types of conversations in a structured way, that this could be professional learning around this, that I could lead or that I could push in my school building. I hadn't thought about it like that before reading that book, and it was cool. Cultural Proficiency, a Manual for School Leaders, something similar. That one has a sort of a beginning to middle progression of activities that folks can do to create psychological safety, to think about themselves and their cultures, and then move to learning about others and being learning more about the system in schools that create the outcomes that we see we have. I bet a bunch of us have read even Kendi's work. For me, what that one was, that you can't be not racist. And that's what changed my conversation with my staff back in January 2020, when I just told them, like, yeah, it's not enough for you to love kids. You need to be helping me disrupt these systems so our kids can benefit. If not, we're being racist. And that's just what it is. The person you mean to be really helped me think through that a lot of this is about in-group and out-group stuff. It's the way we dress, it's the music we listen to, it's all the ways we signal that we belong to certain groups, and we give those groups priority in our lives. And Cast said the same thing, but said that priority in our, we are significantly socialized to believe that race is the #1 group to be considered. It's the first thing we think about. It's the thing that keeps us, that we think makes us who we are as a society. And some of us built on that to say, once we figure out our in-group is based on race, we act in a way that not only promotes our own race, but that puts down the races of other folks. Like, we would not have something nice if we thought that the people from other groups would also have that something nice. So, like, I could go on and on about a bunch of these books, but I'm thinking that you have your own books that you've read over the years that are different than these, or in addition to these. And I'd like to hear about them a little bit. So tell us a text that you read, and we're gonna hop into Oh man, we're about out of time. Yeah, we're gonna hop in a breakout room. I want you to tell your breakout room what's one text you read prior to the last year, which one text you read during the last year, and which one text you plan to read within the next year that's influenced your thinking on this content. All right, something you read a long time ago, something you recently read, and something that you plan to read. And tell us why. We're good? All right. Sorry, folks that just got in here. I didn't know we were putting new folks that joined, so I'm moving you. Megan, try and move you to room 4. You see the link up there? For room 3, my fault.
Sorry, Terry, didn't mean to hit that button. I was just trying to make that thing go away.
That's all right.
I was like, oops.
I didn't have.
The Poolsville Falcons. That's awesome. This is a very small.
Hey again, everybody. Appreciate your time today. We are just about out of time. I wanted to share two quick things with you. One of them was, as a part of our conversation, someone asked just a few minutes ago, like, where would I start? If somebody said, I'm just beginning this stuff. What do I do? Where do I go? So I said that it's not one place that a person should go or one thing a person needs to read because that's the thing. It's this whole conversation about educating yourself in general and committing to the journey, because it's not one space where you're going to finish. It's just an orientation in that direction and then walking that way. So if you were thinking about this as a school leader, maybe because some developing professional learning stuff, maybe that cultural proficiency manual for school leaders, because there are 50 different activities that you could do that could take you from thinking about yourselves and building safety among a team through some of the barriers to student success. Last thing I'll share is here. That is these two links that are in the slide deck that you have. Though, oh, let me see. I think I put the slide deck back in there in case you didn't get it. So these two links, one of them is to Greater Good Magazine, a whole host of articles that you could read on this content. I forgot where that's from. The Racial Justice, Racial Equity Group. That reading list is out of Harvard. Again, a whole host of books and articles and magazines and podcasts, all kinds of things where you could read that they don't have to be just books. So if you are thinking, where can I go to get immersed in this ecosystem? If it's not the books, you got two links to get you there. The last link of the stuff that, oh, sorry, that's our stuff. One of the last links that I'm supposed to give you is a link to the survey about EdCamp. So I'm gonna make sure I stick that in the chat before we get out of here. I want to make sure I get that into the chat so you can do that participant survey when you're able to. We are out of time, up against that 11 o'clock time. I'm here in the Zoom. If you want to continue the conversation for an after party, I'm here to keep talking. If not, I'm grateful for your time, everybody. I'm going off recording. I appreciate you.